Okay, Emmy fans, if you really know your Emmys, you know that this is the one Hollywood award where upsets happen all the time. So, what are they going to be this September? We've got the best team of prognosticators on the planet, the Gold Derby editors, Chris Beachum, Daniel Montgomery, Joyce Ang, Paul Sheehan, and I'm Tom O'Neill. We're going to start with you, Daniel. The theme of this discussion is possible upsets. I'm warning you can happen. What are yours?
Well, one that I'm actually predicting, and I've been predicting it ever since the nominations were announced, is Michelle Dockery winning Best Movie Miniseries Actress for Godless. Godless has so much more support than anything else in that category in terms of movies and miniseries with lead actress nominees. She's a 3-time nominee for Downton Abbey. I think it's the closest contender to beat The Assassination of Gianni Versace for limited series. So I really think that, and The Tale underperformed with Laura Dern. It only got a TV movie nomination in addition to Laura Dern getting in. So I really think Michelle Dockery is out front to win that one. Although, I do still think that Laura Dern is incredibly formidable there.
Anyone else have a comment about that? I think it could happen, but she's so familiar to Emmy voters as an understated actress. That's my one concern there because of her.
Well, it's also great because she gets to show her range. She's going from Downton Abbey, this buttoned up period British drama, to this American Western. So even if she's subtle, she's we know the Emmy voters love impact and range. And although, she's not playing, obviously, Mary and this character, the fact that Emmy voters have seen her do both might impress them.
Paul, you always score uncannily high with your predictions. Straighten us all out here. What are the long shots that you're looking that might happen? I'm not saying it's your outright prediction. I'm not going to nail any of us down on that. But in other words, beware of whom.
Well, it's interesting because when Daniel mentioned that, I sort of started thinking in my head, I can see Michelle Dockery winning. I mean, because I think everyone thinks Laura Dern's got a shelf full of Emmys, and she doesn't. She just got the one from last year after a bunch of nominations. So that might happen. I think that over on the comedy side, and this goes against our odds and everything, but I think you could see either of or both of these TV veterans who got shelffuls of Emmys getting another one, either Ted Danson for The Good Place or Allison Janney for Mom. I think that Allison Janney coming off that Oscar is really red hot right now. And then Ted Danson, he's also got Curb Your Enthusiasm, where he's playing a hopefully comic version of himself, as well as The Good Place. So he's sort of on their radar twice. He didn't get, they're watching Curb for Larry David's performance, but I could see in that case, Emmy voters were reminded, oh gosh, Ted Danson's so good in all these different roles. And he's certainly doing something that I think is so key, which is the campaigning aspect. And
yes, he's out there. Look, I agree. I think that with these Emmy veterans, we forget that sometimes the vehicle that they're in, like Mom, has not done, this is probably its only nomination, right? Or it's got maybe 1 or 2 in the crafts. I don't even know offhand. But Allison Janney's such a force. And in the case of Ted Danson, he's such a longtime Emmy darling that, we have these Gold Derby awards that we ask our own user base to determine. And The Good Place has overperformed in nominations. It's doing well in the early voting. And Ted Danson is a darling with our team. So I don't know. I think you could be onto something. Anybody else have thoughts about those 3 potentials?
I think Allison Janney is the one that I think probably has the stronger shot between the 2 of those. With Julie Louis-Dreyfus out of the way, Best Comedy Actress is such a wild card category because we don't know who could have ranked 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th in those years. It was just the Julia show for 6 years. So, I mean, Allison Janney could have gotten closer in the last couple of years than we know for lead actress. And same is true of maybe Tracy Ellis Ross is stronger than we've ever considered her to be because she's always been behind Julie Louis-Dreyfus. So even though I think Rachel Brosnahan feels safe, it's still kind of, we're in uncharted territory without Julie Louis-Dreyfus here. So it really could be more of a toss-up than we actually think.
Yeah, I have Rachel. I think Rachel is like the closest to a lock out of all of the acting categories, but I think I have Allison in second just because of the Oscar and everything, and she's won 7 of these already. So, but I actually think we should watch out for Regina King in limited series TV movie, because this is her 4th straight nomination. Both of her wins were upsets. Last year, no one was really predicting her to win because of Big Little Lies. Like, we all knew Laura Dern was winning that. So this could be revenge. She could beat Laura Dern. Like, neither of their movies or show did really well, and 7 Seconds was canceled. But we know they love her. She's just become this Emmy force the past couple years. So they could just check her name off because there's no like real frontrunner in that category.
And do you think that, I mean, the Oscars are painfully aware of, Oscars so white. I mean, Emmys haven't been guilty of that, but what they've done in a sort of stealth way is expanded their voting base in the last few years quite dramatically on the Emmy side. Does that help people of color and underrepresented get wins like a Regina King?
I think so. I mean, like last year we had so many, like first time like people of color winning certain categories, like Lena Waithe. And Donald Glover becoming the 2nd Black man to win comedy actor and the 1st Black man to win comedy directing. And we could get it in drama actress with Sandra Oh, because she's the first Asian actress to be nominated there. And I think she really needs to like ride that narrative now, especially with the success of Crazy Rich Asians. Like she could become the first Asian winner of that category. So I think it's like there's like an opening there for her to win, even though like everyone's predicting Elizabeth Moss right now. And
I want everyone to note that Joyce is saying Asian because she's Canadian, and Joyce was the first one to sort of note this idea. And
everyone keeps writing Asian American, but she's Korean Canadian.
Good point. And of course, Paul was born in Toronto. That's why he's got to underscore this Canada thing, but we're all for that. Chris, what do you think about all these crazy ideas that our buddies are tossing out here?
I think there are several categories that are real toss-ups, and I'll throw drama actress out there. When Rob and I did a Select Fest a week or two ago, you can honestly make a case for all 6. I think it's the only category at the primetime ceremony where you can truly make a case for all 6 people based on the type of performance or their Emmy history or the type of show. Everybody seems to be picking Elizabeth Moss to repeat, but remember Claire Foy just beat her at SAG, kind of surprisingly. Claire Foy's won twice in a row at SAG. And the one that I think might be turning the corner in your Derby analogies, Tom, and for them to look out for is Keri Russell. She just won the TCA over all men and women in the dramatic. And this season was the first time we've seen any glimpse of humanity in her. And the Americans,
her character, yes,
in her character, not Keri Russell herself. But she, toward the end, became a little bit more human and humane. I could see a scenario actually where Keri Russell and Matthew Rhys win. And we were talking earlier about Joyce is going to have an article up this week about the very, very few shows in drama that have done that. One lead actor and lead actress in the same year.
Hey, Tom, you wrote this wonderful piece the other day as an Emmy voter talking about the process of voting for the Emmys and how this year it's very intrusive in that they really keep demanding that you watch these episodes. But what you all, in that really must-read piece, you talked about Tatiana Maslany winning a couple of years ago, and one of your theory about how she sort of pulled off that win. So just explain that nuance, because the Emmy voting, or at least tallying of the votes, has changed, right?
Right. Actually, there are 2 nuances I forgot to add to that piece that could help here. First of all, the voting process is what Paul's referring to here, and that is 2-3 years ago, the Emmy voters would rank the contenders in a category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the contender with the lowest score would win, because it was looking for a consensus. And 2 years ago, Viola Davis won Drama Actress. She's, of course, she's an industry darling, Oscar winner, and all of that. And you could see how and a deserving choice to win, of course. Or was this 3 years ago? And then yes, 3 years ago. And then 2 years ago, Tatiana pulled off the upset. And the voting process had changed that year to basically a plurality vote. The voter just checks off the winner. And you could see how dividing the contenders by 6, you get, 18% theoretically you would need to win. And you could see how she would get that. And here's where the second point of Emmy voting comes in. And we see this on the SAG ballot all the time, which is hilarious. Which is, for example, you keep wondering at the SAG ballot, why does Orange is the New Black, why do they keep winning that ensemble award so much? Well, they would enter the most names on the ballot. So I'm a SAG voter because they merged AFTRA and SAG. And since I do television, I have to be a member of that union because they kill you if you don't. And so therefore it makes me somehow qualified to judge acting. I don't know, but I am. And when you get the ballot, you just see all these names under Orange is the New Black. And of course you're tempted. Wow, that's a real ensemble. Here, when you look at the Emmy ballot and you see Tatiana Maslany as, her 42 characters where she keeps changing identities, it really kind of throws things to her advantage because as we know, they're suckers for that at the Emmys. And any of these peer group awards for multiple roles. The most notorious example of that historically, of course, is Lindsay Wagner winning this category, drama actress, for The Bionic Woman, not comedy actress, drama actress, because in the episode in those old days that she submitted to the judges was one in which she played a good and bad example of herself. But yeah, I see what you mean, Chris. You could even make a case for Evan Rachel Wood in that category, a strong case. And that would be, that segues to Westworld, and that segues to my two contenders where I say, watch out, this could really happen. And this is Thandie Newton. I think that I think we all, and this is sort of switching categories to supporting actors. Of all the characters on that show this year, and I was with most of you very upset with the show early on in the season. It didn't make sense, and it was this convoluted mess, and it was pretentious as all heck. But boy, when it started making sense and weaving together, it was magnificent television, and it got, of course, a boatload of Emmy nominations. And I think standout performances include these subtle performances of Evan Rachel Wood, of Thandie Newton, of Jeffrey Wright, of Ed Harris, and there are these kind of smoldering volcano performances that are so alluring. In the case of Thandie Newton, because she plays a sex worker, a madam, that really kind of makes her character all the more sexy, and they really play that up on screen brazenly. And I think that, watch out, boy, she's compelling as anything there. And my other watch out for would be in the category of TV movie actor. And this is where Darren Criss seems to be the runaway favorite among victors, the odds at Gold Derby. And among our experts, let me see, we've got 8 piping in, 19, 11 go for Darren Criss, 6 go for Cumberbatch. But I'm the sole person out on a thin, shaky limb for Antonio Banderas. And I think the case to be made there is he's a movie star. And we know how much they love that here. And he portrays a famous person. We know how important that can be. And a really important and artistically pretentious character, Picasso. And I think that, boy, oh boy, that's a real winning combination. Chris, you would talk about Banderas as a contender here, because this is a conversation you and I have all the time about movie stars. And I know we've discussed this specific thing in the past. What's your view?
Yeah, well, I do think I've gone back and forth with the 3 you just mentioned over and over and over again. I think it's one of those 3. And Antonio has, whether you're talking about Oscars, Globes, Emmys, whatever, you always talk about transformative performances. Mm-hmm. Here we get to see him over decades, and we get to see him go from middle age to very elderly, and he shaves his head. And they just love, voters of any type love transformative performances. And I just wonder. Now, Benedict is interesting because they also he gets to go over time too. He gets to do a 30-year arc, but he gets to do the pain pills and the alcohol and the drugs. And we know that voters of all types love that as well. So I think.
Well, except if you're Hugh Laurie.
Well, yeah. Well, Hugh Laurie would have won under the system, I guarantee you. because they're going with popular choices. Steve Carell would have won under this system. But everybody just blindly picking Darren Criss. Yeah, he could win, but these other two really stand out to me as possibilities.
Somebody else.
Let me add one other thing too. Last year, we're still learning the system. I mean, we've only had 2 years really of what Tom's talked about on the rule changes, and there really are no big rule changes this year. So it's really our second year only of exactly the same as what we had last year. Of our primetime odds, the overall composite Gold Derby odds at the primetime ceremony, we only missed 3 categories last year. I don't remember exactly what they were, but Ann Dowd was one, and she was way down in 4th or 5th place. The other 2, I believe, were in 2nd place. So our people collectively, experts, editors, users, top 24, are smarter than anybody individually.
Right, we got almost 80%. And let's explain, in addition to the difference in the voting of the plurality versus the ranked consensus voting method, the other thing that has changed from 3 years ago is the broadening of the voter base, whereas 3 years ago, you could only vote, which is true now, in your peer group. You had to volunteer to watch, in this case, it would be DVD submitted by the 6 nominees in one category for acting, and then you would sign an affidavit saying that you've watched all 6, and then generally the most dynamic performance or flashy one would win, but only about 75 or so voters would participate because it's quite an intensive experience getting the DVD shipped to you and all of that. Well, now the doors have been thrown open and everybody's allowed to vote in every category. You were restricted previously to 4 categories, 2 within your peer group and 2 program awards. Now you're allowed to vote for all the program awards and you're allowed to vote for all of the acting categories. But as Paul was mentioning earlier, this really obnoxious reminder, obnoxious this year, it was intrusive last year, but now it's in your face at every corner as you go around the ballot online to vote, which is, have you really seen an episode of each one of these? And if you haven't, go over here, and here's a link to watch to the viewing site, a separate site at the TV Academy's website. And it's wonderful because it really stresses that. And it does scare you. I'm a voter, and it scared me out of a lot of the program categories where I had not quite seen everything yet. So, and because there are so many categories that you get to vote for at the Emmys now, you don't really mind skipping even 2/3 of them, as long as you get to vote in a couple of them. And of course, people who work in the TV industry have at least seen everything nominated in several categories or more. So it's an interesting compromise. It's not a perfect system yet, but we all like the old system where everything was very, very carefully monitored in terms of the voting. But the new system is trying real hard. But as Chris said, this is only the 2nd year now where we've had both changes, the wide opening of the voting to everyone, and there are more than 2,000 members of the actors branch, as opposed to about 50 to 75 people voting on a certain category in the past. And now the change in the plurality vote versus the consensus.
Yeah. What's interesting is, when they switched to the consensus vote or the plurality vote, and they opened it up to everyone, I think what a lot of us feared, and certainly I feared, is that it would suddenly just become a popularity contest where it's like, okay, they know Robert De Niro, so of course Robert De Niro will win. What's been interesting is that we've seen a lot more of these kind of under the radar, or not under the radar, but like lesser known actors, newly established actors winning over veterans, like when Rami Malek beat Kevin Spacey, pre-disgrace of Kevin Spacey, when people still admired him. Last year, Riz Ahmed beating Robert De Niro, Tatiana Maslany winning 2 years ago. And I think what might have done that, and what might open the door to those kinds of upsets, and actually helps Darren Criss, I think, is the fact that if you had a ranked ballot, if you weren't as familiar with someone, you might rank them 6th. So if you don't watch Orphan Black, or if you don't care for Orphan Black, you might rank it 6th. But so that was a way you could vote against someone in a way that you might not put Robert De Niro 6th, because he's Robert De Niro. He's at least 2nd or 3rd or something. So I think that has opened the door in a way that I wasn't expecting. So that definitely.
I think you have like a really passionate fan base behind you, like Tatiana Maslany, like she has like hardcore fans. Like if you love that performance or that show, like you will vote for her. And because it's plurality now, you don't need a consensus. So you need like, you know, like 14% if it's like a field of 7. If it's a field of 8, it's like only 12%. So it's very easy to get that majority. And I think like Rami that year, like that was another, like he's not like popular, but there was a lot of passion behind that performance as well. He hasn't been nominated since, but like, you know, that like those wins made sense. And even like Endowed last year made sense given how well Handmaids did. I think the only one we're all kind of like, what the hell is Ben Mendelsohn?
That's the only one under this new system that you just really scratch
I think
your
that
head
was like
on.
we were all, or like most of us were predicting Kit Harington that year, and I think like he and Peter Dinklage could have canceled each other out because now vote splitting is a thing without the ranked ballot.
And yet, interestingly, not as much of a thing as we would have feared. A lot of people beat co-stars last year, but I think it might just be
like if there's like one obvious choice, like they will vote for you, like Sterling K. Brown in OJ.
And
like,
Sterling K. Brown, and This Is Us.
Yeah, like there was no way that like David Schwimmer or like John Travolta were winning that. Like it was Sterling all the way.
But with 3 Handmaids actresses nominated for supporting, and let's go back to my Thandie Newton ability. I think she's my outright prediction at this point. Joyce, finish up this thought. Do you think that helps the non-Handmaids people this year, or do you think there is one outstanding Endowed's back, and do you think there is some one outstanding favorite there, so it's less of an issue? Supporting drama actors.
I have Yvonne Strahovski winning that right now, just because I think she got the most buzz and hype towards the end of Handmaid's.
Well, so did Kit Harington with Game of Thrones, and he lost.
but I think the difference is like those like Jon Snow and like Tyrion, like they're both like popular characters, you know, like they're kind of like on the same level, whereas like Aunt Lydia, like she's like an all-out villain, whereas Serena kind of got like a little bit of a redemption arc in her episode in Yvonne's Mission. And I mean, you know, I don't know how much they think about like, oh, like we gave it to Anne last year since they love repeats. So, and like Alexis also won last year in Guest. So if like they could just be like, oh, we'll give it to like the one Handmaid's person who did not win yet, who also had a really great season.
But we don't. They don't have that kind of memory.
No, but like I mean, they did it for like West Wing, like all the guys. They just rotated.
Well, the good news for Handmaids, that you know certainly ahead of Game of Thrones in one regard, is that we know the Actors Branch really loves Handmaids. Handmaids was undefeated in the acting categories last year. It only lost to itself. So you know this year, you know those 3 women could split the vote, and still one of them could win. So it's hard to know who exactly that is. I think if the vote splitting happens, we could also see not just Thandie Newton capitalize. I think Vanessa Kirby has a shot. She also had a really great season. She was just in Mission Impossible too, so she's had another round of press behind that. So you know, and it's the last chance to reward her, just like all of these main cast members who are cycling out as they're aging the characters. So I think she's one to watch for, but yeah, you know, Handmaid's Tale has won more acting awards last year than Game of Thrones has ever won. So I think vote splitting might not hurt Handmaids as much as
went with Maggie Smith 2 years ago in drama supporting, and everyone was like picking Lena Headey or like Emilia Clarke or Maisie Williams. Like they just, because I think like those 3 characters are all like on the same level of popularity as well, and they split the vote.
Paul, pipe in here.
No, I'm just, you know, I love to be right on my predictions. I'm absorbing.
You're taking notes here. You can steal from the best of us. That's smart.
It's because, you know, and it's such a good reminder about just how the overall odds will do better than any one of us individually. So
yeah, we're smarter together than we are separately, and that's always been true historically at Gold Derby. Regardless of the award show, regardless of the voting process, the collective odds usually beat any individual group, including the top 24. But I
think about you know last week and this week is the voting, and so I mean Chris, you're in Los Angeles right now. I mean, how present are some of these people, whether it's in advertising or in events or, you know, in this, the glad handing aspect of it. Right now, like who's sort of, I mean, I think Amazon's done a brilliant job with Mrs. Maisel, you know, like pitching it and the way they've positioned it when voting's going on and the building up excitement for the second season. Do you have any?
Yeah, they're doing a good job, but they've made nobody available to the press, mainly because they're shooting season 2. So I don't know if that's going to turn around to bite them. Most every other show has made people available, and some of the most available people actually have shots. Henry Winkler has been really out there. Matt Smith has been really out there. Yvonne was for a while, but she's having a baby in just a few weeks. So that's curtailed her efforts lately. Of course, some people don't campaign at all. Larry David or Elizabeth Moss doing exactly opposite of what she used to do for Mad Men, which is nothing.
But she got her Emmys last year. She's good. She's taking.
There is an Academy event tonight, right here in the middle of voting, and we've seen Marcus and I go to that each year and cover the red carpet for that. It's a performers reception, and normally there's 20 to 25, and it's the only event for actors that is Academy sanctioned and in the middle of voting. And we've seen people show up to that and glad hand and kiss babies and talk to everybody at the party is in the acting branch. And we've seen that 2 years ago. That helped RuPaul, I think, win. Last year we saw Gerald McRaney come to the party with Delta Burke, and we saw him win, and others too. But there's only 8 of them coming tonight, which is a real, I don't know what that means.
So those 8 are winning.
Yeah, maybe those. Well, some of them are in the same category, so I don't guess all of them can.
It'll be a tie.
Who's going to the party, Chris?
Give me a second. Henry Winkler, as we just mentioned.
He was on one of the late night talk shows the last week too. He's so smart. He's handling this so well.
He's handling it really well, and the word is getting out that he's never won before. RuPaul, again.
Who Joyce says they could win both for the first time ever, right? Make history, right, Joyce?
Yeah, no show has ever won both reality competition program and reality host.
Of course, more people could add on, but Louis Anderson, so that's the same category as Henry Winkler. Gerald McRaney, we just mentioned. Ricky Martin and Darren Criss. Regina King and Bryan Cranston.
Yep.
That's it. That was 8.
Wow. Well, that's certainly, if there's only going to be 8, I mean, that's a pretty good list right there.
Well, we have, I don't remember exactly everybody, but we have seen people show up to that, really work the room, and win a few weeks later. I thought you've got 200 to 300 actors. That might be all that's voting in some categories, like a guest star category or a short form category.
Well, just to maybe in closing comment, but just coming back to, you know, in your piece, I mean, you voted last year and comparing it to this year, do you think that's going to put any voters off, that kind of the constant?
No, I think because of it normally would, yes, your suspicion, but because there are so many categories, especially in acting, you know, comedy and drama series and lead and supporting and guest and miniseries, there are so many that that they get to vote into a lot. But
let me ask you this, now that we've been talking about this a little bit, with the new warnings and making it even more of a possibility that people might skip some categories, or I'm thinking, okay, if I'm a voter and I get to a category, and let's say just in the course of the last year, I saw 3 out of the 6 anyway. I just like those shows. If I now sit down and watch 3 out of the 6, the 3 I haven't seen, does that make those more possibilities for me to vote for because they're fresher in my mind?
I think yes, and I think this is what you're pointing to is probably the key thing about the voting, and that is, I think in the mind of the voter, they think, oh well, all right, I've seen, let's say, 3 of the 5. In other words, a slight majority of whatever the list is for a given category, and then I think they feel they have permission to not, I mean, to still vote, right? If they've only seen, let's say, 2 of the 6 or something, I think they stay away. But the big surprise is the more I corner individual voters and say, answer this question. How many categories percentage-wise do you vote in? And I did this last year, and I've done it partially this year. It's less than half. Really interesting. I think it would be about half last year. I'm anticipating less than half this year because the admonishment is so ferocious this year. It's before you vote in a category, it's while you're voting in a category, and it's when you're about to submit your ballot for that category. There again, they've got that finger in your face. You sure you've watched everything here? And it's such a guilt trip that it's very powerful. And I think that it's now safe to say that a majority, at least, I would say half of the 22,000 members, or maybe it's up to 24 now, thousand members of the Academy don't vote at all. And of that, about half to less, they vote in half to less of fewer of the categories. The voting participation at the Emmys is still surprisingly small compared to the Oscars, where even though the Motion Picture Academy will not admit how many people do not vote, the best guess from the best Oscar consultants that I have heard when I speak to them privately is that only 80 to 85% of Oscar voters actually vote. Can you imagine? It's the snob appeal of being a member of the Academy, where you're not even allowed to apply to that Academy. At the TV Academy, you apply. But here at the Motion Picture Academy, you have to have two people sponsor you and invite you. You're not even allowed to apply. And by the way, membership dues are twice what they are with the TV Academy. It's like now $250 or $300 membership for the Motion Picture Academy, and about half for the Emmys. I think it's $200 now for the Emmys. But even given all that, the participation rate is only 80 to 85% at the Oscars, and it's 50 to 40% at the Emmys. On that note, we're going to wrap this up, and we're going to really drill down more and more into this Emmy voting this year, not just because it's fun and because it's fascinating and it's new, but we got to figure this out because these guys out there need us to help guide them so that they do better in their predictions. And basically, we don't know yet. So let's at least hope we're giving the best performance by pundits faking it. Cast your votes at Gold Derby. Thanks for watching.